much, everyone, for joining us. Happy Pride Month. So, my name is Lacey, and I'm the community manager for Shadow's Edge, which is a free mental health game created by the Digging Deep Project. It was created to help teens manage their mental health and build emotional resilience, which has been very helpful in this past year and a half. And at Shadow's Edge and Digging Deep, we talk to a lot of young people who play our game while they're working through whatever current personal challenge they're going through. And that also includes teens that are working through questions about gender identities, sexual orientations, things like that. And this month is supposed to be a time for celebration for those in the LGBTQ community. But as the manager of Shadow's Edge, and I am on the social media accounts and I talk to our players a lot, I've received a lot of messages from teens and young adults who are really struggling right now with, just different anti-transgender bills coming out of the South. And it's already hard enough right now to be a teen, but a teen who's going through gender identity questions, sexual orientation questions, the bills aren't just not helping those young people right now. And as a cisgender straight woman, I don't have the personal experience that where I can fully understand how to best help someone who is in the LGBTQ community. And finding the right things to say to be supportive can be a bit daunting at times. And I can only imagine, I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine that navigating this as a parent to an LGBTQ person is even more daunting. But it doesn't mean that we can't learn and grow to be a source of support. So I'm here today with two very awesome people, Michael Bennett Spears and Sophia Aubry Drake, who are both on the front lines of their respective fields as members of the LGBTQ community. Can we start with Michael? Could you introduce yourself and kind of describe what you do?
Yes, as you said, Lacey, my name is Michael Bennett Spears. I'm the current sitting chair of the, or Northwest Arkansas chair of the Stonewall Democratic Caucus of Arkansas. I also work with a lot of local LGBTQ plus organizations here in Arkansas, one of them being the Equality Crew, which is an LGBTQ plus led support group for youth in the LGBTQ community. And I generally am constantly working as a community advocate for our community in the state. And I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Michael. And Sophia, would you mind introducing yourself and kind of describing what you do as well?
Yes, so my name's Sophia. I work in the video game industry. I'm a presenter, host, and video game consultant. I work for a number of different companies and specialize in helping and promoting independent developers, and by running a competition for independent developers and helping scout them for a publisher, whilst, like I say, traveling around the world and hosting, presenting, and those sorts of things.
It's like the dream job for teenagers and young adults that are really into gaming. So I wanted to start out with the first question. This one's for Michael. So let's start from the beginning and say a young person in your life has just come out as gay or lesbian, bisexual, or any of the other categories underneath the LGBTQ spectrum. Can you give us some ideas of how we can be supportive in the initial coming out phase? Like what was something you appreciated when you were a young person going through that?
I can definitely say the absolute number one thing you can do is to make sure the individual coming out to you knows that you love and support them, and that this changes absolutely nothing about your relationship with them. A question that often comes up when somebody comes out is people ask, well, are you sure? And my response to that is always, chances are, if they've reached the point where they're coming out to you, they've been thinking about this for a very long time. And yes, they're very sure. So that's a question that honestly, I would say just avoid asking that one and just say, hey, you know what? I accept the identity that you've chosen to share with me, and you go on from there. Along those same lines, I would say, ask them, is there anything they need from you? Let them kind of take the lead on telling you how you can best support them at that time. This is where I'd also add that if you have any misgivings or personal struggles with accepting that identity, that's okay. And it's not uncommon. The trick, though, is that recognize that that's something you have to deal with yourself. That's your own personal struggle. Don't put that on the person who's coming out to you. There are so many resources available for parents, friends, family members of LGBTQ plus peoples, and much of that is specifically geared toward dealing with and supporting people who are coming out. And so, find something like your local PFLAG group or so many other organizations where you can build your own community with other people in the same situation with you and find ways that you can best support the people you love.
Awesome. Thank you. Because I know when someone initially comes out, like a parent may not know what's the best way to respond. And that's really helpful. Thank you. And Sophia, I have a question for you. So let's say it's a very similar situation, but someone's coming out as with a new gender identity, or not new, it's their true gender identity. How do we, approach, like, how do we show them support while also still celebrating like who they were in the past, but also letting them know like we understand who you are now, and or who you have been and who you are expressing now. I don't know if I phrased that correctly.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, just, for the audience, I'm transgender. So I think it's just important to say that, what I'm saying is sort of based on experience, but also based on talking to people and what helps people. First of all, though, I'll say everything that Michael said basically applies to transgender people as well, in terms of being open and accepting and listening to people. And I think in that regard, this also applies in the same way. I think one thing that has to be remembered, such as that, are you sure, is whilst to the people who are just hearing this for the first time, it may or may not, but it may come as a great shock and surprise. But I think one thing that's worth remembering is that that person has probably spent an awful long time considering, thinking. It's a big deal to sort of come out with this. I mean, to say it took me a long time is an understatement. This isn't, this is like 20 years of build up or so to come out. So I think it's all about listening, taking it on board, and then just working with that individual to basically do what makes them feel most comfortable. Asking, what pronouns, they may have already said that, but what pronouns, clothing, all those sorts of things. It can in some ways be a big adjustment, especially if it's something you're not prepared for, as maybe as a parent, and it will take time. It will definitely take time, but it's about, in my opinion, basically working with the person, in this case your child, but I say person because it could also be like a brother, a sister, obviously a sibling if they're coming out as non-binary. It could be anyone in your family, and I think it's just basically about listening to them, taking things on board, and approaching this with just the same kindness you might approach someone when they bring a partner back for the first time, or anything that's new and different. Maybe they're just doing a career change. I'm not saying it's trivial. I'm just saying basically listen to the person, listen to what makes them most comfortable, and go from there. And I think it's okay to ask questions as well, just as long as it comes from a loving place.
Mm-hmm. And also knowing like what questions are not your business is helpful too, essentially. Like that this actually is a question I had planned for later, but this is a really good question that I had someone request at one point. We discussed it previously in this webinar. What do you have to say to young people who are frequently being asked invasive questions about things like surgeries and stuff? Like, I know this question's coming a little earlier than we planned, but because that happens a lot with people who are transgenders, who have no business asking about things like surgeries and stuff. What advice do you have for a young person who is being asked these questions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a conversation between a child and parent is a different matter. The parent and child would probably want to have conversations about those things, especially in the case of like if going through major surgeries, like I have. You want to have the support of your parents on board, and obviously through things like recovery. So I just want to say that from that point of view, I think there is a different circumstance for parent and child, as long as it's, within a loving environment. And I think that is sensible. In terms of the wider public, though, would you, basically the general rule of thumb is, would you ask this of any other person, in society, or even any other family member? Would you start talking about, let's say, private parts or intimate decisions or anything else like that? Because I think the general rule of thumb is, if you wouldn't talk about that with the general person on the street, and you wouldn't ask those kind of invasive questions, then there's no reason why you should be doing it now. And if you're the person having those questions, it can be hard, it can be upsetting. I've experienced these sorts of things. I think the thing to always remember is, you have a right to privacy, just like any other person on the planet, and you have a right to sort of, however you want to approach this, deflect, or to just say, oh, that's my private business. However, you should never feel guilty about not answering those questions and keeping that to yourself. That's totally a private matter. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. I know that's a very important one that has been an issue for many people.
And it is as simple as, your privacy is your right, and you're entitled to your privacy.
Thank you so much for answering that question. So I have a question for Michael again. So with you, we would love to hear about what it was like running in your state for office, and what it was like to essentially become like a role model for young LGBTQ teens and youth that want to be in politics. Could you tell us what we were talking about last time we chatted?
Honestly, it's an experience that floors me every single day still. It's one of those things that, particularly when we get into the aspect of talking about finding myself in a position where I'm a role model for youth, it's frankly something I still struggle to not kind of like tear up and choke up when talking about, just because there's so much emotion behind it. It was one of those things in November of, oh gosh, this feels like an eternity ago, 2019, I, suddenly found myself with somebody message me saying, hey, we need someone running for the Arkansas State House of Representatives in your district. Would you consider that? And the next thing I know, I'm in this whirlwind thing of, I've got 6 days to raise a very large filing fee and drive across the state to file in person in Little Rock. And of course, freak ice storm happened at the exact moment that it was time to drive 3 hours across the state to file.
Oh my goodness.
So my husband and I literally got off work on that Monday night and drove to Little Rock, Arkansas. And then we're in the Capitol at 7 a.m. to that Tuesday morning filing. It has been something I never dreamed of being able to do. I look back at being this, I grew up poor in a rural town in Northeast Arkansas. Add on top of that, being gay in a very conservative area. And now suddenly I find myself in a position where I'm speaking on stages, openly saying my truth, fiercely claiming my identity, and using that to inspire other kids that are growing up in the exact same places that I did, to say, hey, it's okay to come out. It's, your identity is not a hindrance. If anything, it's a strength. Use that. You will make this world better. And so it's just, I could talk about this forever, and I don't want to take up the entire time. But I still have notes that I've saved from all these kids. I say kids because I'm 35 and at 16 years old, I've gotten to the habit, saying, teenagers, and I say kids. But I received so many messages. Some of them were, like, I'm out and I want to go into politics, and it means so much to me to see an openly gay man standing on that stage saying, I'm gay. I'm the second openly gay man ever to run in Arkansas for the State House of Representatives, the first ever to run in my part of the state. And I didn't, they say, I didn't want to be the first one to do that. So thank you for opening that door. I also have messages from people who are saying, I'm not out yet. And I'm terrified of stepping out of that closet and of being openly myself, because I'm afraid of not being accepted. I'm afraid of what it'll cost me. And to see you standing on that stage, completely out, open for the world, doing all this and actually using that as your voice makes me feel like I can come out, that it's safe to do that. And so that's really what that means to me, is it's put me in a place where I can reach out to youth and to say, hey, there's beauty in what you are. You are important, you're valuable, and use that. Don't be afraid, come out in your own time. Of course, everyone does this in their own way. As Sophia said, some of us, it takes 20 years, and that's great. I think of it as, not to be corny, but like a butterfly, you come out of the cocoon when it's time. And if you come out early, it's too soon. So, but didn't mean to ramble there.
No.
Answered that question of just, it means a lot, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime. And I really hope to be able to continue to use this to kind of boost the mental health and to show, hey, there's this whole beautiful world out there waiting for you. And if I can do it, anyone can. So.
And I kind of have a similar question for Sophia, and I have a follow-up based on this topic for both of you about, like, Sophia, so what's it like to, like, what does it mean to you to be basically a role model to anyone who is transgender wanting to go into the video games industry? Because it's kind of been known to be very cis male dominated.
I think it's an interesting one for me. When I came out, I mean, obviously, I'm sure like a lot of people, there was never the idea of like becoming a role model, doing any of that sort of stuff. But due to the nature of the work I did, I came out whilst in the industry. And because, as I said at the start, I'm a presenter, host on global stages. For example, I keynoted things like the Tokyo Game Show and spoken at, hosted events at like E3 and stuff like that. So coming out sort of privately was not really an option for me. So I kind of, at one of Pocket Gamer's own events, which is an industry event, I kind of, so to speak, ripped the Band-Aid off and came out on stage in front of about 400 or so people before announcing and putting the limelight, as it rightly should be, back on the independent developers I was helping to get noticed. And from there, it obviously, it was something that was easily visible on loads of stages, and obviously traveling around the world, you deal with a lot of stuff. I've also done interviews for, I should have said, you can all probably tell from my accent, but I'm British in the UK. I'm actually from rural North Wales. And so, I've done interviews in the national papers in the UK. So to bring all of that together, to me, being a role model was something that I stepped into. I wouldn't necessarily say it was not by choice, but I stepped in gladly, because for me, I just know the struggles I went through in my own head, primarily throughout my life. Worried that people would, abandon me, leave me, that I wouldn't be able to be successful, that I wouldn't be, able to be my true self. So to be able to eventually come out of that dark place, come out, and I suppose I wouldn't just say not only to hold on to the success I'd achieved, but to be able to be much more successful and much happier, not because I'm trans, but just because I'm happier being me, was something I wanted to spread. And so the whole idea of being that role model, so to speak, was more for me to show other people that the best thing you can do is embrace who you are, believe in yourself, and live your true life, because that's what has helped me, and that's what's helped loads of other trans people that I know in the industry. And also with trans people, a lot of the time there's a lot more of us than you might think, because we're just going about our lives normally. And so basically the point is, I wanted to share that with people. When I did the interview with the Guardian for the national papers, I got a lot, you obviously get a lot of trolls and stuff like that. But my whole mindset was, if it helps just one person know that, you can be your true self, you can be happy and successful and get beloved, and all these things are not out of reach, then that was worth it. And that's why I do these things, because I just think if it reaches one person, then and it changes their life, like coming out changed my life, then it's just all worth it.
And this is and I'm sorry if I put you both on the spot of calling you like role models. It's just I truly believe you two are, and I could go on and on about both of you to everybody. But my question for each of you is, how do you protect your mental health? Because you both are in public spotlight, and and that's an important thing. Is many people who are LGBTQ want careers that are in the spotlight, like if someone wants to go into politics or someone wants to go into public speaking or video games, anything like that. What advice do you have on protecting your mental health, on keeping yourself emotionally healthy and resilient when you've got all these eyes on you of people you don't necessarily know or trust all the time, while still being authentic to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, from my point of view, I think I've experienced transphobia. I'm also pansexual, so I've experienced homophobia. I've experienced all those sorts of things. Like I know Michael has as well, and I think it's it's not to try and be naive to the fact that these things happen, but it's to know that I think part of it is knowing that there's a vocal minority and that you're on, like you are loved. And I think it's associating yourself with the right kind of people. If you've got a supportive family, associate yourself with your family. If you surround yourself with a network of friends and allies, and also, when I say believe in yourself, that sounds like a really nebulous term, and it's really, like, oh, go believe in yourself. But I mean, just remember that living your true, authentic life is more often than not the best way for you to live your life, the happiest way for you to live your life. I mean, in many respects, where we're talking, ironically, in better positions now, there may be extra things I would say to some of the countries I've been where the laws are extraordinarily, oppressive, even compared to the likes of the United, like things that are going on in the United Kingdom and certain states in America. In our case, in the UK, it's a lot of press attacks, and I know, Michael firsthand knows what's going on in certain states in America. But so my advice might be different to certain other people. But I would say just surround yourself by people who love you, who support you, and also, find ways that help you embrace who you really are. For instance, that could be going out to really welcoming and inclusive nightclubs and bars. If for me as a child, that was through video games. You can see all my games and consoles here, especially those games that allow you to create a character and be yourself. And I'm not talking about big online games. If there's a parent they're worried, I'm talking about games that are solely one player experiences, like the likes of things like Mass Effect, where you create a character and it has, all these different LGBTQ romance options and gender options. And so find ways that help you embrace who you really are. And also, two things, and then I let Michael talk, is like I would say, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to be affected when someone upsets you. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be frustrated and upset with the way things are, and it's okay to want to make a difference and want to make a change. I feel that all the time, and on that point, it's okay to feel vulnerable as well. It's do what makes you feel most comfortable in that particular moment, and don't feel guilty about protecting yourself and looking after your own mental health. Never be afraid of those things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And I would love to ask the same question for Michael.
I know, definitely. I mean, I have a lot of the same things that Sophia has to say, as far as, make sure that you build that core group of people. Because one thing you'll hear, I think probably not just in the US, but pretty much any LGBTQ plus community anywhere in the world, is this concept of chosen family. And that's because a lot of the times in our communities, we have to build our own family. And it's an unfortunate fact of the matter, and I think we'll touch on this later on in the webinar, of sometimes you find yourself with people who, when you come out, they're no longer in your life. So in turn, you find the people that want to be in your life, and those people will be the greatest support to you. If you build that core of people, people can say or do anything to you, and they're not going to be able to tear you down. I know, one of the first things I was asked when I said I was running for office, where people were like, hey, do you realize that you're the first openly gay man to run for office in a very conservative part of the country. Don't you think that's going to be a problem? And me being me, this is just my personality. My response was, well, honey, I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing since I've been out in Arkansas for 20 plus years now. I'm going to smile at them, wave, drink my coffee, and keep living my life. But that only reason I'm able to do that is because I have that core group of people, because I have a very secure view of who I am. And so even if I'm, reading through comments online or doing a speech and someone comes up to me after and says something horrendous, my immediate thought, and this might be a little bit petty, is, but do you know who I am? Because sure, you look at me and you see a gay man. Ooh, scary. But my response is, do you see that, what are you doing for the community? Because I'm going out there and I'm lifting up kids, and even though I can't wrap my mind around it, according to, people like Lacey, I'm a role model. And that's kind of my shield in it, is I know who I am. I'm very happy with who I am. I have people who love me, people who support me, and I know that that's a constant in my life. And that's how I deal with that. Is the rest of it is just background noise. And I just let it fall away. And I keep my eye on my truth and my happiness. No, it's not always easy, but if you can do that, you'll make it through anything.
I love that. And that's great advice.
Yeah, and all I was going to say on that as well is like Michael's so right, and and I've experienced it, like I'm sure everyone in the community has. But I think it's all right to know that it takes time to build up that mental resolve as well. So if you are just coming out and it's difficult, it can be difficult, but it's not to say you get used to it. I'm just saying you become more confident in who you are. I think is the more positive way of it, is you become more happier in who you are, more confident, and that gives those comments less weight and less importance to you.
And I will follow up real quick after Sophia said that, of pointing out that, I sit here today doing this webinar saying, I don't care about the haters. I know myself and I love myself, and no one can take that away from me. But I know that we may have people who watch this webinar that are not at that point in life. And that's okay. And I definitely want to take the time to recognize that the man sitting here talking today was once a teenager that struggled a lot with loving himself, that struggled a lot with depression, anxiety, rage, and doubt. But my point is I sit here today as this person, as proof that you can get through it, that it does get better, and just hang in there and find those people and you will get there. That I can promise you.
And I love that. And back to talking about building that group of people who support you, like when let's say it's family and you've come out, and the person that in your life that is not responding well, and they've, let's say it's someone who's very adamant to oppose this. They're basically asking the question, are you sure, but aggressively, things like that. And then let's say in the end, you kind of don't imagine them changing in the near future, and you've had to separate for your own well-being. How would you help? Well, one, how would you help someone in your life who's going through this cope? Because there's going to be a sense of loss, especially if it's someone very close, like a close uncle or a grandfather or even a parent. How would you help someone else who's going through that? And what is something that, if you were to speak to the person who's kind of adamant about not learning and accepting, I would love to hear your thoughts on that particular subject.
Yeah, I mean, I can start if you want, or you can, Michael. Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that, and it can, I should say, because a lot of people will assume it's my family, but my parents have been fantastic and supportive. And to any parents out there, though, I would say that the one thing is it takes time. It's not like it was difficult for my mum and dad, but difficult not in a they didn't want to accept it. Difficult as in it takes adaptation, it takes conversations, it takes, it takes time. So, but my parents have been very supportive and brilliant. No, but I do have experience of this in another area, and it was when I was first coming out, and it made things very, very difficult, and it sent me to some dark places, and it made me feel very, very trapped and hard. And it took me a considerable length of time to break out of that, and to be able to be me and to be happy. And I would say that one of the big things that helped, and to anyone here who's struggling with that, is it comes back to this support network, and it begins with one person. Finding that one person that you trust that says to you, it's okay. It's okay. Great. I still love you, whether that's as a family member, as a friend, as a partner, whatever. I still love you. You're brilliant, and I want to embrace the real you. Or the complete version of you. And I think, and I did that. I found that one friend, and then once you have that one friend, it slowly becomes easier to get to tell the second person, to tell the third person. And before long, you realize that there are more people who love and accept you for who you are than the people who are trying to stop that. And that's really when you're able to sort of embrace yourself. And I try and avoid saying things like break free of the other people, because I think too often we frame it on the other people when it should be framed on you and embracing your true self and you being happy. And if some people don't want to come along for the journey, then that's up to them. Maybe they'll join you in a few years' time, maybe they won't. I know that some friends I left behind, and it wasn't really that I left them behind, it's that they didn't come on the journey with me, and that's okay. That's fine, because nothing beats inner happiness.
I think, once again, I'm gonna do that thing where Sophia goes first and I just stand here and basically snap and say yes.
I feel like I do the same as well.
But
whichever one of us gets in first.
It's great, and either way it's a win. But as much as I hate to say it on this question, there comes a point in every LGBTQ plus person's life where we have to make those kind of decisions, and it always hurts. It always hurts. But you have to remember, much like Sophia said, that your number one priority is always going to be to taking care of you and your well-being and maintaining your happiness. You don't owe anyone the right to abuse that. If you've got someone in your life who adamantly challenges your identity, if you're transgender and they adamantly dead name or use the wrong pronouns, if you're LGBT, any of the other in the broad spectrum of LGBTQ plus, and they are adamant about telling you how they feel personally about it and how they oppose it and why, you don't owe them that space whatsoever. That is not your responsibility or your burden. And if they choose to not accept you, once again, like Sophia said, that's their loss. They're the ones who get to miss out on going on that journey with you and seeing you happy, of seeing this completely new, beautiful, whole person that you're becoming. You are still going to continue on your journey. You're still going to find your happiness. You're still going to live a great life. You're not missing out. They are. And that's something that I think you really have to remember when going through those moments and looking at that and saying, do I want to do this? Do I want to, for lack of a better term, cut these ties? Yes, you do, because it's not going to take away your happiness. Because you will go on to do exactly, once again, you will find those people. You'll find that one person, and then you'll find the next one. And then the next thing you know, for every single person that you've had to walk away from, you're walking toward another one that's there to embrace you and to go on this beautiful journey with you. And once, and finally to end on that one, you'll, particularly when it comes to loved ones, when it comes to family members, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, you'll often find that if you have the strength in that moment to say, you know what, that's okay. I love you, but I also love me. And so I'm going this way. And if you choose to stay here, that's up to you. That's the way it goes. That's your choice. And you'll find, though, that a few years later, sometimes even, suddenly they pop up and they say, hey, I know we haven't been talking, but I've still been watching. And I've seen the person you've become. And I see the way you shine. And I want to be a part of that. And so always remember that it's never permanent. There's always a chance for, I hate to use this word, but redemption in the relationship, for things to turn around. Never look at it as, oh, I'm having to walk away and we'll never speak again. That might be the case, but often when they see you and what you become, they're going to want that in their lives, and they're going to find a way to incorporate that and make it a part of it, and everybody wins.
It's also important to note that it's in like that is like the ultimate like dream is like someone eventually comes around, but it's also like not a young person's responsibility to change someone, because that's a lot of pressure to put on someone.
Yeah. I was separated from I was very blessed. I had parents. My mom was the most supportive person you could ever dream of having. I know that a lot of people aren't that lucky, but I had a vast majority of my extended family that for many years of my adult life, I didn't speak to. And it wasn't, none of them ever said anything openly disparaging. There was just this tension. Anytime I was around that, I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. I love you. I'm going to go over here. I'll send you text messages on Easter. But, and then we had a death in the family and we had to come together. And I took my husband with me. And my mom was like, are you sure, is that okay? And I was like, if they want me there in this time when I am hurting, just like the rest of them, and they expect me to not bring my husband, who is my core support, that's their problem. Next thing I know, they're talking to my husband more than they am me. He has one of my aunts, the one that I really expected to not be the one, wrapped around his finger. And it wasn't a thing. And we had a great time. And now we talk constantly. And I get all these messages of, hey, how are you? How's Joey? Da 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 da. And yeah, like that's the ultimate dream goal that I never thought would happen. So
I love that story, actually, because I know you had mentioned the last time we talked about what it was like to bring your partner home to your family the first time, and that kind of helps me open up to the next question of like having, just back to like what we're saying is having that one person that's supportive is just so important. And it's also like learning how to be supportive makes it so where if you become that person, so much more important. That way, that's why we're holding this webinar, because what if you are that one person in someone's life? And this is kind of a awkward question, but like, let's say you're a very supportive parent. How do we approach not being like completely smothering? Because teenagers always think their parents are uncool. So let's say a parent is like so outwardly supportive to the point where the kid's like, Mom, stop. What do you have advice for like helping a parent figure out that balance?
I mean, with that one, if you are that kind of parent, God bless you. Like, thank you. Like we sit here and talk about how like people like Sophia and I are role models and da da da. I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, the supportive parents are the honest to God, like bedrock of the heroes of of the LGBTQ plus community, because that is invaluable, particularly if you look at the statistics, but I won't go into that. But as far as how to be supportive without being smothering, let them take the lead. Let your kid take the lead. Let them tell you how they want to support. Like they may be the kind of person that is incredibly outgoing and they're like, yeah, I want to have a party. There's going to be rainbows, glitter, sparkle, cake. Let's do this. They also may be the kind of kid that's like, I really just want to know that life's going to continue as normal, that nothing's going to change, that I'm still your child. And that's it. That was my dream. Thank you. Have a nice day. we're moving on. And the best thing you can do there is let them make that choice. Let them tell you how best to celebrate that, because it's going to be different for every kid or adult if they come out later in life. So,
yeah, again, everything from my side that Michael says is spot on. It's, be led by the individual, the child, or, when we say parent and child, it couldn't be an adult that has a parent. Just be led by them. But I was thinking about this before when we were talking about, when you might have to let go of some people and support of other people, and there's nothing feels better than having like your parents or your close family, whether it's siblings or anything like that, is having them on side and having them like loud and proud on side, and it can be in subtle ways. It doesn't have to be shouting and screaming, like it's like the fact that you might see I've got like the rainbow bracelet on for Pride Month. It's like my mum is wearing one as well. I didn't ask her to wear it, I just spotted she was wearing it one day because we bought them as a pack and she'd taken one of them, and that sort of thing is just such an amazing feeling, because it reinforces the fact that it's okay for you to be you. And even if you're someone who's just starting this journey and may be comfortable, let's say in a parent-child situation, you may be uncomfortable in certain situations outside. And in the case of a transgender person, it can be sort of unpredictable how and when dysphoria can hit you. Of course, there's obvious occurrences, if someone accidentally dead names you or misgenders you. But there could just be something where, for some reason, you try on some clothes in a shop and then you notice something about yourself, or maybe, anything like that. It can be all sorts of occurrences. So knowing that there's that safe place in the home, and that your parents or whoever you live with is like totally behind you 100%, is just a really comforting feeling, so that if you're having a down day, then there's support and love there. And that can all, that's the case for anyone in the whole LGBTQ sector. Maybe you watch a news article that says something about the new laws, or some sort of negative media press, or someone said something to you, knowing that there's that place is just an amazing feeling. So yeah, I'd say parents, and I use siblings within that as well, that are supportive. To me, they're like the bedrock. They're the heroes, because they're the people that really allow people like me to be comfortable in myself, because I can battle on and be me through grit and through mental strength. And you need an element of that, and there are people out there who do it solely based on that. And all the power in the world to them, because they really deserve all that happiness. But those people who have a supportive network around them, it's like that shortcut to happiness. It's like that it allows you to just keep growing and growing, because you've got that strength in you, and then you get that strength from other people, and then it's just like this never-ending cycle of happiness and positivity. And that's really what life should be about, is just being happy, being positive, and associating with the people who love you. We always talk about small communities and villages being the bedrock of society. And in many ways, to me, the smallest of them is that like family and friend unit, the people you associate yourself with, your colleagues, your close friends, your family. And yeah, I think having those people be positive increases your positivity, which just really increases their positivity, because you're a happier, more positive person to the people around you.
And I love that. And so when we get to talking like this, we answer questions that I already had. So, and I know we had been chuckling about this one off camera before, about how, let's say it's a very supportive parent. It's good to note that when your child comes out, and you want to be supportive, it's no different. Like them getting into the dating realm is no different than if when I say someone's kid, it could be their sibling, it could be their adult child, it could be anything. But it's just, with us being aimed towards parents, it's easier to say that. But the dating game is not any different. You don't have to, the first time you meet another person who's gay, you don't have to try to hook them up with your son or daughter. Like it's not necessary. The dating pool's not that small. So do you have anything you would like to tell parents or friends about just things to keep in mind that might maybe feel supportive like that, but aren't necessary. To either of you, we could start with Michael since Sophia talked last.
I mean, really, I think you already nailed the head when you were asking the question. As far as like how to approach dating, let's just be honest, you're the parent of a kid. You're embarrassed. I'm sorry. There's nothing to be done about it. As a parent, you just accept that and move on. But the best thing, with dating is to do exactly what Lacey was already saying in terms of treat it like normal. Like your kid comes home with their first boyfriend or girlfriend or, what have you. And you just go on with life. You say, hey, it's so cool to meet you. Would you guys like some pizza rolls? You want to watch a movie? Da 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 da. Here are the house rules, that kind of thing. And also too, yeah, just because, like, let's say you live in a small town and your son's like, hey, mom, I'm gay. Don't, I think it would be fantastic if you actually had a community in which you could say, hey, you know what? Karen's son down the road is gay too. You guys should hang out. Just simply because that would mean you had a community like that existed. But also and that's a general rule with dating, and kids. Please don't do that to the kids. It's horrifying. when they're like, hey, like, I invited the Johnsons over and, their son's available. And I'm gonna go crawl under my bed and never come out again because you've killed me. But so yeah, my advice to that would simply treat it as normal. Like treat it like you always would, and be that wonderfully supportive and probably mildly embarrassing parent because it's unavoidable.
Yeah, and I'd add that if your child is embarrassed and hiding things or anything like that around dating, I would say that's because they're your child. That's got nothing to do with their sexuality whatsoever. It's because it's embarrassing. And, as I know with some of my siblings, and we're all adults, that still goes on when you're adults as well. My brother does not like talking about his dating life with my mum and dad. He does not, and he's an adult. I think it's just normal, and as long as it's parents are going to be parents and children are going to be children, and I think that's irrespective of sexuality, basically.
Thank you for chuckling with me, you too, because I would just love to talk about so let me see. So I'm trying to think, we've already answered so many of our questions. So if you had to pick one of your top pieces of advice to a young person, if I know we've covered so many great things, but if you had one thing that was the most important thing to keep in mind on your own personal journeys, what would you say? Again, I know we've covered so much today. Yeah. So,
I think about this a lot. It took me decades to come out as both trans and as pansexual, which to anyone who doesn't know in the audience is, basically just means gender's not really relevant to me. So whether someone is non-binary, trans, male, female, I fall in love with people. And it took me a long time to come out with that. But, when you think about, would you change anything in the past? I probably wouldn't, because I wouldn't want to do anything to jeopardize me becoming the person that I am, because that's the most important thing. And if one thing I changed in the past meant I wasn't able to come out, it wouldn't be worth the risk. But the one thing I do wish I could go back is I wish I could go back and tell that person that struggled as a kid in their own mind, I wish I could just go back, give them a hug, and just say, it's okay. It's all right. You don't have to be ashamed of who you are. You don't have to be scared of who you are. And you don't have to try to be someone that you're not. Just be you. Because if you're you, then life will become easier. I think people around you always say, well, life's so much harder if you're trans, if you're gay, if you're non-binary. You hear that in society a lot. Oh, life's so much harder if you're different, so to speak. But what I always say to people is that may be true, but that pales in comparison to how hard life is if you're not true to yourself, if you have to spend a life hiding who you are, hiding who you love, hiding what makes you happy. There is nothing worse than that. And ultimately, that idea of, it's hard being different. And I use it because there's nothing wrong with being different. In my opinion, as someone who travels the world, being different, whether that comes from, uh, nationalities, cultures, sexuality, gender, relationships, religion, anything. That's what makes this world so amazing, is how we're all so different and great. But that's something that we as society are slowly fixing. People like Michael are helping make this world a better place by doing those sorts of things. And so all I wish I could go back, and the one piece of advice I would pass on is literally that, is know, and I know there are a few bits of advice, but they're sort of wrapped up into that one thing of know that it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to love who you are. It's okay to embrace who you are. And, you shouldn't have to hide who you are, who you love, what you do. It's, be proud of who you are. And then I suppose I'm sneaking in a second one is, find your allies, find your family, and associate yourself with those people who will help your confidence and happiness grow.
And I think, once again, like Sophia and I seem to just kind of bounce back and forth, repeating each other. But, we can't help it. We're both just so great. But, I would say the same thing, like, I wish I could go back and I could find that 13-year-old boy that first realized and looked in the mirror and said, oh God, I like boys, and panicked, and say, hey, it's okay. Life is messy. Life is not perfect. The ride is going to be bumpy. But I would also, and yes, there are going to be some things that are particularly associated with the fact that you are LGBTQ+. But the fact of the matter is that life is bumpy and messy and a roller coaster for everyone. It is not something that is your fault because you fall in the spectrum of LGBTQ+. You just so happen to identify as one of those identities while going on this journey. Remember that you're perfect, that you are exactly who you are supposed to be. You are exactly where you're supposed to be at this time. Roll with it. I know I always wrap some advice like this up in something that was said to me when I was a teenager. Because once again, I was lucky to have very supportive parents. I also grew up in the South, where religion's a big thing. And I had one of those days where I'd had a particularly bad day. And I was harassed a lot in school, and I came home and I was a mess. And on top of that, I went to church, and I was having, quite frankly, an identity crisis and meltdown. Because I had this whole thing of like, I believed in God, but did God believe in me? Because they told me that God thought that I was a terrible thing, da 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 da. And I was crying on my mom, laying my head on her lap. And she pats my head and she says, let me tell you something. God made you, and God does not make mistakes. God gave me a perfect son. You are beautiful. You are intelligent. You are kind and compassionate. You bring a smile to someone's face every time you enter a room. Don't ever let someone in their ignorance make you doubt that. No matter what, you are loved. And because of that, whatever the world throws at you, it's going to be okay. And I think that that is probably the most important piece of advice you can give to any young person growing up LGBTQ+, is that they are perfect. They are beautiful. They are kind. Humanity is this fascinating tapestry of unique threads. And the beauty of humanity is that we're all different. It's okay. You want to be different. If you weren't different, it would be just this boring shade of gray. So get out there in the world. Be your wonderful, sparkly, colorful, unique, and in my opinion, it's a good thing if you're a little bit weird self. And be fiercely that, and don't let anybody stop you. And remember that even if it's hard right now, it will get better if you find those people that recognize that and support that. And today may be crap, but tomorrow's going to be better.
I would love to like get like a printout handbook with exactly what you just said as like to give to parents when their kids have first come out, be like, this is a great thing to say. This is the best. So, and I really appreciate both of you joining us. We are at the hour, and I meant to leave a few moments for questions. If anyone in the audience has one, I apologize if anyone has to go since we're at the hour. But if anyone wants to stay and ask any questions for a few minutes, we would love to answer those. But and also another thing to mention is there is no rush or timeline someone has to come out, correct? Like, because I know a lot of teenagers are like, I'm young, I have to do it now. But what if they're kind of still too scared? Or even people who are on the opposite end, like they're in their 60s or something, and they still haven't come out. There's no set time you have to do it. You are on your own timeline, essentially.
I think there's this thing in society where sometimes people are scared that they've sort of missed their chance, so to speak. But I think we are finally accepting that, first of all, do what's most comfortable for you and makes you feel most comfortable, but also that there's never a wrong time to do what makes you happy. We've had in the UK one of the most famous television personalities. He's in his 60s. He's just come out as gay, and did it on national television, and it was it was great, as in everyone supported him. It was well accepted. But I think it was important because sometimes people have to be the people in the limelight, but it showed, no, it's okay, it's fine, you do it when it's best for you.
And I love that. And if there aren't any questions from the audience, I think we will wrap it up. Now I'm gonna be sending out a newsletter to all of the webinar attendees with a link to the recording and a list of resources as well within the next 2 days. And if you think of any questions for either of our panelists, feel free to respond to that newsletter and I can pass them on. And I appreciate both of you for speaking with me today. Thank you so much. And again, I apologize if I misspoke in any way. I'm like a lot of people who were attending today, still learning and growing on how to be an ally and a support source for anyone on this LGBTQ spectrum. So thank you so much, you two.
Oh, thank you.
This was wonderful.